Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Justice, and today we're going to be jumping back into the Carrie franchise with 2013's Carrie, the third adaptation of Stephen King's novel, and the last one I'll be covering before moving on to the stranger entries in this franchise. Now, if you guys have seen my reviews on both the 1976 original and the 2002 made-for-TV movie, you probably already know I've hinted a few times at how I feel about this remake, so let's just put it out there and clear the air. I am a proud defender of this movie. I saw that original teaser of the film of Carrie going through the town and destroying the city and was immediately intrigued, and that was my introduction to this franchise, and the story was that teaser. And I'll admit that maybe part of it is me being blinded by nostalgia, because this is the Carrie movie that I saw when I was a kid and the one that built my intrigue for this whole franchise. And yes, in the last video I admitted that the 2002 version was technically the first Carrie film that I ever saw. This one continues to hold a special place in my heart, and yes, like I said, nostalgia may be my bias, but I do genuinely enjoy this movie. That being said though, this is a safe space, and if you're like me and love this remake, you're welcome here, and if you don't like it, totally fair, I see you, and I'll be pointing out plenty of flaws too, because as much as I defend it, this is far from a perfect movie. And the biggest criticism, and honestly the most valid one, is that this isn't really a new adaptation of King's book. Instead, it leans heavily on being a beat-for-beat remake of Brian De Palma's film. Whole scenes are lifted straight from that version, including added material that wasn't even in the novel, like Tommy's poetry scene in class, or Miss Desjardins' extended moments, such as her confronting Tommy and Sue, and her other scene where she gives Carrie that sweet pep talk in the locker room. Those were all De Palma created scenes. Reading the behind the scenes, it's worth noting that Kimberly Pierce, the director of this film, wanted to create a movie that was more original and modernized, and you can even see echoes of that in the teaser. You have all these voices talking over the disaster of the night. It almost seems like they were trying to reference the White Commission, which was amongst the documents and court testimonies from the novel, and from what I can tell after doing some research, they cut out a lot of the violence in this film and did a bunch of reshoots after the tragedy of Sandy Hook to avoid any backlash, and it's rumored that over 40 minutes of deleted scenes exist and just have never been released to the public, some of which would have included the town destruction and more emphasis on the modern technology. And I can't find any hardcore proof that these scenes do exist for a fact, but if they do, it is a shame that there hasn't been any actual release or word of it, because it makes interviews with Kimberly talking about how she wanted to make the film different incredibly laughable, because this is just a modernized take on De Palma's film at the end of the day. But to give credit where it's due, this movie does sprinkle in a few scenes from the novel that De Palma left out, and those moments really help flesh out the characters. You have a scene with Tommy and Sue added where he hypes Sue up to apologize to Carrie. There's a scene with Chris's father going to the school to try and get Chris back into the prom, which is added in, and rather than just having the principal and her father in the scene like in the novel, Miss Desjardins and Chris both appear, and I love the back and forth between all four characters, and it's one of the scenes where Chris really shines as a stone cold bitch, which is something I'll get way more into in this review, because I love this iteration of Chris and Miss Desjardins for that matter.
You're right, Daddy. That's what she said. Shitty. She's really abusive.
And I'd really die on the hill that the casting in this remake is mostly spot on. Every actor feels well suited for their roles, and that's one of the biggest reasons I hold this film in such a special place. This film was actually Ansel Elgort's very first role, and honestly, I think he knocked it out of the park. He feels like such a believable love interest. He's very charismatic and really easy to buy in as Tommy, and I'll admit that I am totally biased here yet again because The Fault in Our Stars was a massive phenomenon when I was in school. Everybody was reading it. Everybody was crying over his character dying in the film, and it basically left a scar on my entire generation. So, yeah, maybe that nostalgia covers how I see him here. But I think he nails the balance of being a jock while also having that heart of gold kind of energy, a little bit of a golden retriever, even. So I feel the need that I should probably redact my earlier statement about Ansel Elgort. This is really the only part of the video where I glazed him, and as I was editing, I discovered more about some accusations that were made against him that have to do with SA, and a whole bunch of girls came forward for it. And I'm not a true crime channel. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of this, but I'm always going to support and believe the victim. And it sucks because I like this movie and I like The Fault in Our Stars, as I said, and it paints those movies in a different light. But at the end of the day, he's not the only actor in those films. He's not the main actor of this movie. And I'm not going to damn this entire film when you have plenty of other actors in it who did their damnedest to give a good performance and haven't done anything wrong for this to be written off for them. But anyways, we'll get back to the regularly scheduled program now. Then we've got Chris, who I mentioned a second ago, the queen of bitches and a type A mean girl. And she's played by Portia Doubleday. And I've got to say, her version of Chris is probably the most ruthless take we've seen yet. She feels like one step away from being a full-on sociopath. And Portia sells it completely. The way she carries herself, the look she gives, and her delivery makes it so easy to believe that she's this person, and she just completely embodies Chris. In fact, there's all these moments in the movie where she drops these like snarky teenage angst dialogue where it just shows how entitled she is, and it just cracks me up every time I hear them because she is just so freaking easy to hate.
I fucking hate Carrie White.
Another performance I need to shout out as well is Judy Greer as Miss Desjardins, and this is my favorite version of the character in any of these adaptations. Judy brings such warmth and kindness to the role, and it really does feel like she cares about Carrie more than any other version of the gym teacher, but she also layers in just like the right amount of comedy and humor, and Judy Greer is just a really good comedy actress in the first place, so it works perfectly here. And her performance feels more grounded and compassionate and totally believable.
Are you gonna get him a boot in the air? Or are you just gonna pin a bloody tampon to his lapel?
And of course, I can't talk about Carrie without talking about the two most important characters, Margaret White and Carrie White. The mother-daughter dynamic in this film compared to the other adaptations hits in a really powerful way, at least for me. Julianne Moore's performance as Margaret is phenomenal. Her abuse towards Carrie feels far more emotional in a different way than what we got in De Palma's version. Piper Laurie played Margaret as someone who seemed to have no love for Carrie at all, just a woman obsessed with spouting sermons and controlling her daughter through fear. And the closest we see to her affection is in the climax when she hugs Carrie while plotting to kill her, and even then, it doesn't come across as her having any compassion for her daughter, even if it's for messed up reasons. Julianne Moore, on the other hand, brings a very different energy to this role. You genuinely get the sense that she loves Carrie through all the disturbing things she puts her through, and in her twisted ways, she believes she's saving her daughter's soul. She's more emotionally manipulative, and in many ways even scarier, and the moments of self-harm really stand out for her character. Some critics of the film say it's just for shock value, but I think it works as a magnificent way to show how much she guilts Carrie. Margaret hurts herself to manipulate Carrie into thinking that her daughter's quote-unquote sins are the cause of it, and it adds another disturbing layer of how toxic and broken their relationship really is at the end of the day. And then there's Carrie herself, played by Chloe Grace Moretz. And yeah, I'll be honest, I understand the criticisms. She doesn't look like the book version, and she doesn't have that awkward, unsettling presence that Sissy Spacek or even Angela Bettis brought in the previous movies. She's very much a cover girl type, and I know that bothers a lot of people. I have a different take than most people on it, though, because abuse can happen to anyone. You don't have to look weird or awkward to be ostracized or bullied or abused. You just need to be vulnerable enough for a bully to set their sights on you. And on top of that, I think Moretz is a really strong actress. She brings a believable emotional core to this role, and I just think that she gets way too much criticism for the looks department. Like I said, I get she doesn't look like the book version or the film versions, but I do like this little extra thing that like shows you that like you don't need to put like abuse in a box for like who's going to get abused and who's not. All that being said though, I will not defend the marketing because those posters are, yeah, those are a choice. Chloe is styled like she's on the cover of Vogue's Halloween magazine. It's way too glossy and done up and completely the wrong vibe for these movies. But inside the actual film, with the text we're given and the performance that we see, I think she does a really damn good job carrying this movie. No pun intended there. We just won't talk about some of those weird ass expressions though that she makes randomly throughout the film. I think this movie though, overall, it plays out way more like a tragedy than many of the other entries do. You don't have as much focus on the horror elements as you do in the original one. In the last two adaptations, I feel like as Carrie's discovering her powers, it's set up in this way where it's supposed to like elicit fear from you, versus in this version you see some fear with Carrie as she's discovering her abilities, but overall there's also this like mix of wonder with it as she's starting to be able to take control and learn how to use her telekinetic abilities. And this film, I think, out of all of them, could easily draw a parallel between Carrie being like an X-Man that was not found and they weren't able to save before they could like hire her on to be one of the X-Men. I think this film plays out way more like a tragedy though because of that, because this first part of the film, yes, there's your horrifying moments with the abuse that Margaret pulls on her. There's of course the infamous period scene of Carrie getting pelted by the tampons. Like those are all things that you're going to see in a Carrie film, but something about this one feels way more uplifting to me and way more lighthearted with the characters and gives you more hope that Carrie is going to make it through to the end and have some kind of happy ending. And the way it flips the script when you get to the eventual prom scene, I think is done really well. And for that prom scene, I really do enjoy how that scene plays out. You have so many of these really cool shots of like moments of seeing each individual character dying, and as it's all going on, it seems like Carrie is in full control and vengeful mode. The first movie, it seemed like she was in a trance, and then you have the 2002 one where she doesn't even remember her lashing out after the fact. In this entry, it seems very calculated and cold, like you pushed this bitch too far and she's going to show you what's up now. I really do like that energy to the character. I think that's a very natural way to change it up, honestly. And I think that a lot of the kills she does in this scene are extremely memorable. Like you have this one guy that gets crushed inside a set of bleachers that she closes in on him. You have this other girl set on fire, which is a really cool fire stunt. And then you even have this other scene where these two girls get trampled by everybody running over them. It's a very gruesome entry. And another thing that I do enjoy as well is Miss Desjardins gets to survive in this entry. Because of the portrayal that they're going for during this prom scene shows Carrie so calculated and cold towards all these people that abused her, it wouldn't make much sense for her to kill the gym teacher in this version. So I do enjoy that she actually gets saved. And then After that, I feel like that's when we get to the closest glimpses of what I talked about a minute ago of like the destruction of the town. It is the closest thing we get to seeing anything like that in a higher budget, and it honestly isn't even much because as Carrie's leaving the gymnasium, you see all these fires starting to erupt in the streets from this overhead shot. It's a really brief glance of a scene, and then even when you get to the scene of her getting to Chris and Billy, I love the change up to that, and I've mentioned in the other videos too that there is a version of Chris and Billy's death that is my favorite, and this one knocks that slot like out of the park. It is so freaking good the way the entire thing's handled. Because on the town destruction, you see Billy and Chris trying to drive away from the scene of the act. Then Carrie sees them and she like stomps on the ground and all these cracks form and the street just bursts apart in front of Billy and Chris's car. And then when they turn around, they go to run Carrie over and she stops them and it like knocks Billy out. So then Chris takes control of the car and Carrie lifts this car up into the air. And there's questionable CGI in this movie, but nothing that happens here is questionable. Like, I think it all looks really good and has aged really well for this scene in particular because she has this car lifted in the air and she's essentially toying with Chris as Chris is like revving the engine and like getting the miles up there, but the car's not doing anything. She even like tries to choke Chris with the seatbelt at one point before Chris unclicks it, but then finally, after Chris decides to push on the gas one last time, truly test a bitch and see if she'd go there, Carrie does, in fact, go there and sends the car sailing into this gas station. And we get this Mortal Kombat style, like, fatality scene of Chris's face just smashing through the windshield with some really cool effects and again really good use of CGI because it looks so damn good and it's so freaking memorable. Like this is the best version of those characters' demise, especially for how wicked they make Chris in this entire movie. When she finally gets her just desserts, it's just chef's kiss right there, man. And when you get to the eventual scene of her mom at home, this is where I will kind of critique the movie a little bit and move more towards that direction because I don't think everything here is perfect. I really do enjoy that mother-daughter dynamic between the two of them. I think that's a lot of fun, like I said a minute ago. And I think that it's put onto really good effect when she first gets home because you have Margaret manipulating her, but then you see how she's telling Carrie that she loves her because she's her daughter and that she didn't kill her when she was a child, even though she thought she was a curse, because she loved her and she couldn't bring herself to do it. And she begged for God to save her little girl for her. That's what I was saying for how I feel like this character seems like she has more compassion for her daughter and it's not all rooted in hatred. She's still an awful mother and just a total POS, but like you can see that she does have some love for her daughter through like all of her warped and crazy delusions that she has about the world and just how tightly she is wrapped around religion in this film. You can still see some love for Carrie other than just this like theatrical sermon like you saw in the original. When she does eventually kill Margaret, though, they redo that scene from the original film, and this is where it kind of loses me a little bit, because in the original film, they used practical effects to do that parody of a crucifixion with Margaret, the bastardization of her religion, and it looked really cool. And the way Piper Laurie played the scene as well, where she treated her death as like a release, and it looked almost orgasmic and pleasureful for her. And that's something I mentioned in my first review as well, that the scene was actually meant to be played as your typical death scene, that it wasn't supposed to be this like blissful experience for Margaret. She was supposed to die how one would die, very painful and gruesomely with a lot of grunts and screams. And that's what we get in this version, and it does take a lot of the steam out of the sails, especially when you just saw how much Piper Laurie like threw herself into that role in those moments, because that is such a memorable memorable sequence in it, and such a memorable acting choice, because who thinks to do that when you die? That woman is a legend, and I can totally see why she got nominated for the Oscar for that role. Not only is the performance not as memorable in those moments to me, the CGI that they use to pin her up on the wall just proves that a lot of times, like, you don't need CGI to make scenes look better in a movie, and it doesn't age the best either. Because I know back in 2013, when I saw this movie, I didn't think it looked that bad. In fact, I actually kind of liked it. But looking at it now, a lot of scenes like that just look really freaking sloppy, and they're not that good. It is aged very poorly, in fact, and you can just tell it's a whole bunch of computer generated shit on the screen. It doesn't look real at all. And this isn't the only point in the movie where you feel that. There's even a sequence earlier in the film where Carrie's testing her powers in her bedroom, and she has all these books floating in the air. And when I was watching the behind the scenes, they talked about how they tried doing it practical with like fishing hooks or whatever, and they just could not get them to work for them. And I wish they would have figured something else out, because all these years, it's not even that many years later, actually. I don't know why I said all these years, because it just doesn't look that good. It really doesn't. That's my take on it, anyways, man. But no, if you guys haven't noticed, to cycle away from Margaret and the bad CGI of it all, I haven't really talked about Sue at all during this, and the main reason for that is because I really don't think Sue's character in this version is all that memorable. I think the actress does a good enough job with the role. Like, I have no problem with her. It's just there's nothing really new with the character for me to note on. And the one thing I can note on, I feel like it's such a nothing subplot that's like added to this movie, and there isn't much reason for it to be here, and it could have easily been cut. But when you have Sue finally go to the house, you have her finding Carrie right after her mom died. And then you have her trying to convince Carrie to get out of the house as it's crumbling down around them, as it does in the first film as well. And she can't get Carrie to leave, but then Carrie puts her hand out and for some reason has the ability to be able to do like an ultrasound on Sue with her mind, but like, okay. And she's able to tell that Sue is pregnant, and even tells her it's a girl. And Sue had no idea she was pregnant, and you get little glimpses of this subplot in the movie. You have one sequence towards the beginning of Sue and Tommy having sex, and then a little bit later on, her having morning sickness. They're literally only a couple scenes, and for some reason it comes back around at the end of the movie, and it almost seems like they were trying to touch upon something that happened in the novel, because you have this fear from Sue in the book that she is pregnant, but then at the end of the book, she has her period and realizes she's not pregnant immediately after Carrie dies. In fact, she has her period, and it's like a really bloody mess, is how it's described. And it has the novel opening on this period scene, and then ending on this period scene, which I'm sure is some kind of metaphor that Stephen King was going for. I cannot tell you what it was, though. I haven't like fully tried to break that down myself anyways, but it seems like they were trying to do a spin on that in this film, and I don't think that it really needed to be done. I don't think it needed to be here. It doesn't add anything to the story, really. We could have done something differently. But yeah, after Carrie does the ultrasound, she kicks her out of the house and decides that she's not going to kill her. And we see the house crumble down into the earth. And I really do think the scene looks cool. I really enjoy the effects of it. And again, maybe it's just me blinded by nostalgia, because I just love that scene so much the first time I saw this movie. And to this day, it sticks with me. The only part of it that doesn't stick with me is all the random rocks that just fall into the house. Like, that house wasn't made of stones or anything, so like, why do we have the random rocks there? Like, was it a callback to like the hail that like rains down in the novel when Carrie was a kid, and like there's supposed to be rocks like bursting through the roof or something? Because I know that's something they talked about doing in the original film, but they ended up not doing that. So I think it's kind of weird that they choose to have all these stones in the house, but then there's no stones raining on the house. And also, another side note to mention on that hail scene, they actually filmed it for this one and they cut it. So far, the second remake is the only version to show that flashback to Carrie's youth of her raining all these stones down onto the house. But to get back on track though, because my ADHD brain, man, we jump back to a little bit later after the house collapses in, and Sue is at this court hearing about everything that happened, and they're questioning her about the events of prom night. And during this sequence, we have her eventually going to Carrie's grave and leaving a rose, and written on the grave is Carrie White burns in hell, or something along those lines. And I don't mind this ending until we get to the cheap jump scare, if that's what you can call it. I don't like it. You have this crack like forming up the grave, and then all of a sudden a fist just punches the front of it, and you hear Carrie's scream, and I feel like it's implying that Carrie's a ghost. And if that was a sequel setup, I don't want to know what they wanted to do with that sequel, because as much as I like this movie, that is stupid. That is such a stupid way to end your freaking movie. And I actually prefer the unrated version of the ending. They have an alternate ending on the Blu-ray that you can choose to watch the movie with, actually, where it's more of a modern twist of the nightmare sequence from the original film. You have Sue in the middle of giving labor, and all of a sudden, like, all the lights start to spaz out, and this bloody hand comes out of her hoo-ha, I don't know how else to word that without being vulgar, and she starts reaching around and she screams, and then she wakes up and it was all a nightmare, and her mother is trying to soothe her as she's very, very pregnant. I think that's a way better ending. I enjoy it. I don't think it's perfect by all means, and I still think there's a better ending they could have came up with, but I think it's way better than the one that we got theatrically. I really do think this movie would get less hate overall if it wasn't a remake. I think if this movie existed in a vacuum, that way more people wouldn't have a problem with it, that they would even enjoy some of the things that this movie tries to do and does do, because some of the things that are done in this, I think, are done really well. But unfortunately, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, and the Brian De Palma version does exist, so it does make it impossible to not compare the two projects to one another, because, like I said at the beginning of this review, this film does not exist as a new adaptation of the book. It is a remake of the Brian De Palma movie. It is not anything else. And because we never saw those deleted scenes, they're not in the movie, they're not in the cut that was released to audiences, there's no other way to judge this movie other than that. That's if those scenes even exist. But even with all that in mind, I still love this movie. I hold so much nostalgia for it, and I am really glad that it does exist, and it just strengthens the love that I have for this franchise. And because this was the movie that got me into Carrie and introduced me to her, even if it was just the teaser that introduced me into this world of Kings, it's what got me into the idea of reading the Carrie novel, which was my very first Stephen King novel I ever read. And I have so much love for this franchise. I have so much love for all these characters, and forever I will defend this movie. I don't care if I lose people here. Like, I love this movie, man. Like, leave me alone. And another thing, too, that I wanted to talk about or touch on, that if you've seen my other videos, you know I can't help myself but talk about them, is the viral marketing they did for this movie. Man, is so freaking cool. I found 2 different instances of it, and stuff like this makes me wish that we did things like this more often than what we do, because I feel like every now and then we get viral marketing stunts, but overall we really don't get them that often. But this movie had like 2 different ones. We had this one where they had like all these people at this like faux coffee shop, and then they had a girl with telekinesis come in and like throw a guy up against the wall and scare everybody in there because they didn't know it was actors, and it caught them off guard. I think that's really cool, and I wish that I could end up going to one of these like stunt marketing things, because I don't even know how I would react in a situation like that, because like I don't believe in people with telekinesis, but like how the fuck do you react if you saw some shit like that in front of you, man, and you didn't realize it was a stunt? Another one that I thought was pretty neat as well is they had this phone number at the end of the trailer that they told you to call, and if you called it, you'd have Carrie answering the phone, and she would be trying to be like, are you from the school, before Margaret would jump in and like pull her away from the phone. In fact, I'll just play a little clip of it right here so you can hear it, because I don't want to have to explain all that.
Are you from my school? It's just my mom catches me. Harrietta! No, Mama.
Go to your closet and pray.
No! Oh, no! Pray, little girl. Pray for forgiveness. Oh, no! Let me out! I know why you're calling here.
And God made Eve from the rib of Adam, and Eve was weak. Say it.
Don't you dare call this number again.
But yeah, no, I wish that we got stuff like that more often than what we do, and it's such a shame that we don't, honestly, man. But anyways, that wraps up my review of the 2013 Carrie remake. You guys should let me know what you thought of it, if you have similar fond feelings for this movie that I do, or if you want to hate on it, just get in the comments and continue to hate on it. Like, I'm completely cool with it, man. Like, you're not gonna make me feel bad for liking this movie. I still have the sequel and the musical to cover for this franchise, and if you want to see those videos and you're somehow not subscribed to this channel and you liked this video, then I would love if you hit that subscribe button. I cover everything and anything horror on this channel. With that all out of the way, this has been Justice, and I really hope to see you guys on the next one. Take care.